Hey students, here we are picking up with Chapter 5, Lesson 2, Part 2. So the pharaohs of old, being the sons of gods and all that, were afforded what we might call special burial arrangements. Their mummies were placed in pyramids with their worldly belongings. Pyramids protected them from weather, animals, and people, like thieves. How the heck were they built, though? Those things are huge. Well, it took years and years of hard labor. Workers would find a big rock somewhere in the Nile River Valley. It would be chiseled into a block. Then the block would get attached to ropes and dragged to the river on a path of logs so that it would just roll right along. It was set up or down river on a barge. It would get unloaded and pushed or pulled up a ramp and be put in place. Sounds crazy, right? I wouldn't have wanted to be on the block moving team. But one can't argue that the pyramids that they created are very sturdy. Here they are in modern Egypt, still standing. Now, the building of the pyramids necessitated certain advancements. All the pyramids' entrances faced north, so they had to learn cardinal directions and explored astronomy, which led to a 12-month calendar. They also advanced their geometry and mathematical skills. It is very hard to build without math. Now, the largest of the pyramids is called the Great Pyramid. It was built for King Khufu somewhere in the mid-2000s BC. For 4,000 years, it stood as the tallest structure in the world. They say each block weighed 2.5 tons. Here it is in comparison to some other landmarks. Let's move on to the daily life of an Egyptian. At the peak of ancient Egypt, it was home to about 5 million people. Almost everyone lived in the Nile River Valley or the Nile River Delta, even though that land area only constitutes 3% of the total land mass of Egypt. But that's where everyone lived. We saw that picture in an earlier lesson. That's where all the green's at. That's where life is sustainable. Egypt had a social structure much like Mesopotamia. At the top was the pharaoh. Under him was nobles and priests. Next came scribes, merchants, and shopkeepers. They were the middle class. The largest class was the farmers and unskilled workers. An interesting point of Egyptian social structure was with hard work one could improve their status, basically move between classes. That's what we call upward mobility. You can see this good graphic organizer, this representation of the social classes. Here's the pharaoh at the top, unskilled workers down at the bottom. Here's your middle class with the traders, the artisans, and the shopkeepers. Now, the rich folk lived in houses made of wood and mud bricks. Sometimes they had multiple floor homes with many rooms and even a courtyard with like ponds and lilies and stuff. Very nice. Rich and famous kind of stuff. The men and women of the upper class wore fancy white linens and used what we might call mascara to darken around their eyes. Sort of a popular fashion you've seen around. The middle class had nice things too, but their homes weren't as big and their clothes weren't as nice. Your average Joe Schmo farmer typically lived in a one-room hut with a roof of reeds. They worked on land for a noble and paid rent, basically in the form of a portion of their crop. The family unit was important in Egypt. Even the gods lived in family units. You remember we said Osiris and Isis were husband and wife. So yes, family is very important in ancient Egypt, really throughout history. Egyptian women actually had similar legal status to that of men. They could do things like own a business and land. Some were even very high-ranking officials, like priestesses. Most kids did not receive an education. Kind of like we talked about, scribes are really the only ones that learn to read and write. But much like other civilizations, they generally took on the role of their parents. A farmer's son would become a farmer. Maybe a merchant's son would become a merchant. Daughters often learned to take care of the household, if that's what their mother did. And sons basically took on the jobs of their father. Wives of farmers typically worked out in the fields with their husband. Once you got to more higher classes, when they could afford not to contribute, that's when you ended up having more of your hostess sort of housewife kind of situation. Teenagers were expected to leave the home and get married and start families of their own. Once a father and mother got sick or too old to work, it was generally expected that the eldest child would take care of them. So that's your basics on Egyptian life in ancient times. Let's go on and see what your assignment is for the day. So today, I want you to do a little paragraph. I want you to write 2 similarities and 1 difference you have found between ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. Now this is a little harder because it's not information specifically contained in this lesson. You're going to have to compare what you learned about Mesopotamia with what you've learned about ancient Egypt so far. So you might have to go back and take a look, or maybe you'll just remember. For example, well, like, oh, we already compared, we mentioned that they had social classes in Egypt, much like they did in Mesopotamia. Wink, wink. So 2 similarities, 1 difference. Write it in paragraph form, please. I have your points outlined here. Each similarity is worth 3 points. The difference is worth 3 points. And then 1 point to round it out to 10 points is for your spelling and grammar. That's it for today. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, hey, have a great day.